May 17, 1995, the city of San Diego endured a wrathful rampage under the mercy of one man's deep-seated frustrations. The notorious fury of Shaun Nelson, commanding an M60A3 tank, transformed California's beach city into a living nightmare. With a mind filled with hatred, Nelson plowed through streets, flattening over 40 cars, shredding light poles, and plowing through neighborhoods, leaving any bystanders or law enforcement within the vicinity in a permanent state of helpless horror. But it seemed the events that occurred on this day had a much deeper meaning, as Shaun would quickly go from a perpetrator to a pawn of those who had wronged him. But who was Shaun Nelson, and how could his outburst turn him into a victim? This is the San Diego Tank Rampage. Shaun Nelson was born August 21st in 1959 in Utah. After finishing his academic year at James Madison High School, he decided to enlist at the United States Army in 1978 with the sole purpose of protecting his country from foreign affairs. The young recruit was stationed in Germany in the Armor Branch and was assigned the role of tank commander. But his journey in the military would soon come to a sudden halt due to his severe case of anger issues, leading him to arguments and fights with his fellow officers on multiple occasions. After being labeled as a volatile crew member by the highest-ranking officers, Shaun was honorably discharged at the rank of private in 1980. But his separation from the Army was not going to crush Shaun's hopes and dreams, as he began dedicating his time and efforts towards starting his own plumbing business in 1981 and eventually getting married to Susie Hellman. Shaun decided to settle down in San Diego, not only for its peaceful neighborhoods and clear skies, but also because the city was well known for having residents whose majority had a military background and consisted of several Marine bases, making it the perfect place for Shaun to be surrounded by people of similar backgrounds. The majority of police officers at the SAPD were military vets who made the city impenetrable to external forces. The city became a safe haven for veterans who could leave the life of war behind them and begin a new journey of growth, making it a perfect haven for Shaun, the Utah native. The city was thriving in its glory of prosperous living, with its booming economy and landmarks that attracted thousands of tourists from all over the globe to admire its beauty. The beach city was one of the safest in the U.S. and provided veterans such as Shaun a second chance at starting a new life, giving them the hope of finally living the American dream. Just like any other hard-working man, Shaun began making a name for himself in the neighborhood with his plumbing business and was known to be a hard worker, often handling dozens of clients in a single day. With the plumbing equipment ready to go and his white business van at his disposal, Shaun became hopeful that he was going to become a successful businessman and get the life he desired. But little did the young veteran know that his life was going to take a nosedive faster than he could have anticipated. The more success Shaun saw in his plumbing businesses, the more his life started to U-turn in the wrong direction. The problems began with the health deterioration of Shaun's mother, whom he cared for and paid for her medical expenses. Both Shaun and his mother frequently visited the Sharp Memorial Hospital for weekly checkups. During one of these visits, Shaun started a fight with the emergency room security guard and was later escorted out of the building. As a form of retaliation, Shaun sued the hospital for assault, but the case was later dismissed. Even during his moments of defeat, Shaun couldn't catch a break, as he faced another loss with the passing of his mother in 1988. The cracks in Shaun's life were starting to show after the death of his mother. Shaun was led towards a path of violence and self-destruction. As days passed by, Shaun began losing control over his temper and would start aggressive arguments with his wife Susie at home. Slowly but surely, Shaun's anger issues began to jeopardize his marriage, pushing his wife to her breaking point. Out of fear for her safety, Susie decided to divorce Shaun in 1990, just 2 years into their marriage. To make matters worse, Shaun later got injured in a horrific motorcycle accident just months after following his divorce, leaving Shaun with severe neck and back injuries. The ambulance took him back to the Sharp Memorial Hospital, but due to his prior fiascos with the place, Shaun decided to leave the hospital untreated. But before he could reach the exit, he was stopped and refused by the staff to leave the premises without proper care. Shaun was later treated, and after being discharged, he later sued the hospital for $1.6 million, citing negligence, assault, and false imprisonment. And after bringing the cases to a local court, Shaun's case was shortly dismissed due to a lack of evidence, which led to the hospital countersuing Shaun for $6,600. It seemed like Shaun's streak of bad luck had no end in sight, as tragedy would strike once more in his family, but this time with the death of his father in 1992. In the following months, Shaun also faced a series of setbacks that brought his business to a screeching halt. Persistent neck and back issues, coupled with the unfortunate theft of plumbing equipment from his truck in June of 1994, dealt a severe blow to his mental well-being. Shaun's financial burdens made him unable to buy new equipment, which caused him to lose his main source of income, leading to the end of his business, followed by the foreclosure of his home. As an added insult to injury, in April of 1995, Shaun's living girlfriend decided to part ways, leaving their once shared home with a sense of emptiness. With the constant bombardment of traumatic events and the accumulation of debt, Shaun's mental health began deteriorating drastically, making him susceptible to drug and alcohol abuse, which only amplified his already present violent behaviors, making him a danger to everyone around him. With Shaun's life spiraling out of control, he attempted to soothe his woes with the constant use of amphetamines. The drugs made Shaun a ticking time bomb that was only seconds away from exploding. This made neighbors fear Shaun and ostracize him from the community. Shaun had reached rock bottom and was constantly seen fighting with his brothers and friends, along with showcasing odd mannerisms, such as mowing the lawn at night and digging a 15-foot hole in his backyard, hoping to find oil and gold at the bottom, feeding in the delusion that the resources below would fix all his debt. Shaun went from being a respectable plumber to a local junkie where people point and laughed at him for his weird antics, but deep down the truth was hidden underneath all the drugs and alcohol. He was a man suffering from mental illness who could only find relief for his emotional and physical pains by drowning himself in substances. Shaun began to develop a hatred for the city that had taken everything from him. He wanted to make everyone suffer as a form of payback for all the pain he had endured throughout his life. Soon, his resentment was going to cost the city of San Diego more than it bargained for. Shaun wanted to leave a devastating mark on the world, a mark that would showcase the rage he'd been developing for years since he got discharged from the Army. Some assume Shaun gained inspiration from the Oklahoma City bombing that took place on April 19, 1995, where over 160 people lost their lives, plotted by anti-government extremist Timothy McVeigh. But Shaun lacked the skills to develop bombs, and he didn't have the funds for weaponry. So he developed a different scheme for terror, one that would leave the city of San Diego frozen in horror. And after a few days of being alone with his thoughts, he decided to put his skills as a tank commander to the test by targeting the California National Guard armory for a tank. Shaun believed that he had the ability to bypass the security of the armory during the evening by entering the facility by driving his business van while pretending to be a maintenance worker. The endless amount of hate clouded Shaun's judgment, and with no close family or friends to steer him away from this vengeful path, he was on his own and used the hate for the city as a motivation for spreading chaos. On May 17th, Shaun executed his plan of hijacking the armory tanks and drove towards the armory. Luckily for him, most of the officers at the armory had clocked out of the facility after 5 p.m., leaving the tanks unsecured. Shaun reached the entrance of the armory and was able to convince the patrol officers that he was going in for maintenance work. As soon as he passed the checkpoint, Shaun exited his van and sprinted towards the tanks, where he began breaking their padlocks. After 2 failed attempts, Shaun tried his luck on starting the M60A3, and to his surprise, the tank had its engine roaring. Soon, one man's rage was going to hold the whole city hostage, leaving a lasting mark on Southern California history. With the tank's engines all fired up, Shaun began his quest for carnage on the streets of San Diego. The M60A3 tank was 31 feet long, weighed about 57 tons, and reached speeds up to 45 miles per hour, making it the perfect vehicle for crushing anything that stood in its way. But unfortunately for Shaun, the tank's arsenal was unloaded and inoperable, reducing the risk of causing mass destruction in the area around him. The lack of weaponry, however, did not stop Shaun from executing his diabolical plan. At 6:45 p.m., the tank burst through the armory gate and began to dart towards the local neighborhoods, flattening every car that came in its path. The tank was unstoppable as it trashed through city lights and fire hydrants and even got close to colliding with a local resident's home. But due to Shaun's previous experience as a tank commander, his movements had a clear objective and purpose: to destroy all surrounding utilities in the neighborhoods. Panic began to erupt as the tank plowed through peaceful neighborhoods and caused a power outage across thousands of households by taking down utility poles that came in its path. The chaos eventually got the attention of the San Diego Police Department, whose officers pursued the tank and made attempts to disable it. But due to the thick armor surrounding the vehicle, the police officers were powerless to stop it. Rampage was slow but effective as the tank caused severe property damage in the surrounding neighborhoods, even attempting to bring down a pedestrian bridge on the south side of Interstate 805. After the neighborhoods he despised were already in ruins, Shaun decided to strike the next target on his hit list: the Sharp Memorial Hospital, a building filled with staff that he blamed the most for ruining his life. With a clear goal in mind, Shaun aggressively maneuvered the tank onto the southbound lanes of State Route 163, which led to the freeway being closed by local authorities, trapping many innocent motorists in the ensuing chaos. Since police were unable to bring down the tank, they called in for backup and notified the National Guard and Marine Corps about the situation. They later prepared the takeoff of a Bell AH-1 Cobra attack helicopter and 2 additional tanks, waiting for the approval of government officials. Meanwhile, as the tank raged forward on the freeway, Shaun wished to cause as much chaos as possible and decided to drive straight into the opposing traffic in the northbound lanes, endangering hundreds of innocent lives. But Shaun's bloodlust could not be fulfilled, as his attempts to cross lanes were foiled by the concrete barriers of the freeway, causing the tank to lose one of its tracks and get stuck between the barriers. It seemed like Shaun was finally out of luck, and the tank being trapped allowed the police officers the opportunity to neutralize the Onslaught once and for all. Following the tank's incapacitation, 4 law enforcement officers climbed onto the vehicle, among whom was Paul Paxton, a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. Upon his arrival to the scene, Paxton scaled the tank and forcefully cracked open the hatch with bolt cutters, ordering for Shaun to surrender. Despite his orders, Shaun remained silent and began rocking the tank in a desperate attempt to break free from the barriers. In a moment of heightened tension, Paxton's partner saw that Shaun had no intentions of surrender and fired his gun. The bullet pierced through Shaun's neck and killed him on sight. And Shaun's devastating rampage finally came to a conclusion, allowing the city of San Diego to rest once more.
A man who reportedly had emotional and financial problems got a hold of an army tank last evening and took it on a wild ride through the streets of San Diego, crushing everything in his path.
I saw the whole street up there was in pieces.
I mean, it was like a nightmare. It was like a Holocaust last night.
This place was like a war zone.
He knew that it was trying to kill us.
After the dust had settled, it was reported that about 40 cars had been trampled by the tank. In a rampage, it cost the city over $140,000 in property damages. The incident became mainstream and made headlines all over the news, highlighting the bravery of the officers who climbed onto the tank to stop Shaun from taking innocent lives. But close friends of Shaun called the act of shooting unnecessary and criticized the police for not using alternative methods to de-escalate the situation, such as the uses of tear gas or negotiation tactics. In response to their claims, the captain of the San Diego Police Department, Tom Hall, defended the actions of his officers, stating that Shaun showed no remorse and had no intention of surrendering, forcing the officers to use their firearms. The state of California later gave a recovery fund to the city of San Diego for the rebuilding of infrastructure and paying back the people whose vehicles were crushed during the rampage. The theft of a tank was the first of its kind in the history of California, due to which the National Guard was heavily criticized for their lack of security in their armories and how they left vehicles of mass destruction out in the open for anyone to access. This provoked then San Diego Mayor Susan Golding to send a letter to California Governor Pete Wilson demanding an investigation into the armory security. Due to this, officers from various California armories have removed all batteries from their tanks and moved them to Fort Irwin and Camp Roberts, far away from neighborhoods, along with heightening their armory security, allowing access to only high-ranking members. The case of Shaun Nelson highlighted how one veteran's unchecked mental health can ruin the lives of everyone around him, spreading chaos everywhere they go. After deep diving into the history of the San Diego tank rampage, we wonder how would have things turned out if Shaun Nelson wasn't discharged from the military, and was the shooting of Shaun by the police officers justified?